My name's Mason Reynolds, 46 years old and 22 years in the cockpit of commercial airliners. Not the most glamorous life despite what people think. Long hours away from home, constant jet lag, and hotel rooms that all start to look the same after a while. But it paid well and kept Victoria in the lifestyle she never seemed to appreciate. I'd been experiencing these strange headaches for weeks. Just stress, I told myself. Just the irregular sleep patterns and too much airport coffee. Until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was on a layover in Chicago when it happened. I remember standing in my hotel bathroom, looking in the mirror, when suddenly the right side of my face just dropped. My vision blurred, and I felt this overwhelming sense of confusion wash over me. I managed to dial the front desk before collapsing on the bathroom floor. The next thing I remember is fragments, paramedics, sirens, a doctor saying, "We need to move quickly. The clot-busting medication needs to be administered within the next hour." Then darkness. 3 days later, I woke up with tubes in my arms and the steady beep of monitors surrounding me. A stroke, they told me. I was lucky. They caught it early enough to prevent permanent damage, but it had been close. Too close. "You'll need significant rest," the neurologist explained. "No flying for at least 3 months. Your brain needs time to heal." I nodded, still groggy, and reached for my phone on the bedside table. There was only one message from Victoria. We'd been married 15 years. No kids, just a mortgage in Minneapolis and a lot of silent evenings when I was home between flights. The message had a screenshot of our joint account balance. $0. Below it, she wrote, "I deserve this after everything I've done for you. $78,562.43. My emergency fund. My retirement cushion. My safety net for situations exactly like this one. All gone." I should have felt something. Rage, betrayal, heartbreak. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. I sent her a thumbs-up emoji. Nothing else. When the doctor came in later to check on me, he asked if someone would be picking me up when I was discharged the following day. "Yeah," I lied, staring at the ceiling. That night, I made a call to my brother Tyler. He lived across town. We hadn't spoken in weeks. Not because we were fighting, we just lived different lives. He answered on the second ring. "Need a favor," I said. My voice still raspy from the intubation during my treatment. "Name it," he answered without hesitation. "Need a place to crash for a few days. And I need you not to tell Victoria." There was a pause. "She doesn't know you're alive?" "Oh, she knows," I said, looking out the hospital window at the Chicago skyline. "She just doesn't know I'm not coming home." I met Victoria at an airport lounge in Denver. I was between flights, and she was heading to a conference. We started talking over overpriced drinks while waiting out a weather delay. She was stunning, confident, ambitious, with this laugh that made everyone around her smile. When we exchanged numbers, I never actually expected her to call. But she did. And 6 months later, I proposed during a layover in Paris. Quick, but not reckless. I was 31, she was 28, old enough to know better, young enough to believe in something. She never liked that I was gone 20 days out of 30, but the money was good, and she liked what it bought. I call from whatever city I was in that night. Sometimes the conversations lasted an hour. As the years went on, they got shorter. 5 minutes of updates, then just checking in. The last couple of years, it was mostly texts. Landed in Seattle. All good here. Looking back, there were signs. She stopped asking when I'd be home. Started taking trips with friends from work I'd never met. But I trusted her. That's what marriage is, right? Trust. Tyler helped me into his guest room the next day. He's an architect, works locally, divorced once. Knows something about the ways people can disappoint you. "You should eat something," he said, bringing in a sandwich. I wasn't hungry. I was thinking about the house I'd bought, about the refinancing I'd done 2 months earlier when rates dropped. Victoria had said she was too busy with work to come to the signing, so I handled it myself. Put it only in my name since my credit score was better. She never even asked to see the paperwork. There was also the medical power of attorney I'd set up last year after my co-pilot Dave had his car accident and his girlfriend couldn't make decisions for him. I got worried. My niece Ellie, Tyler's daughter, helped me with it. Law student, smart kid. She made sure everything was in order. "Does Victoria know you're here?" Tyler asked as he handed me the sandwich. "No," I said, "and we're going to keep it that way for a bit." "She took everything?" I nodded. "What are you going to do?" I took a bite of the sandwich. It didn't taste like anything. "I'm going to get some rest. Doctor's orders." But that night I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, remembering all the little moments where Victoria had seemed distant. Checking her phone under the table, changing passwords, moving money between accounts for better interest rates. I'd been blind, but not anymore. On my 4th day at Tyler's place, I got a text from our neighbor Nolan. "Haven't seen you around. Everything okay? Victoria's got some guy over. Thought you should know." I sat with that for a long time. Didn't respond, just let it sink in. The pieces were falling into place now. The late-night work calls, the weekend conferences, the sudden disinterest in our future plans. I'd been so focused on navigating the friendly skies that I'd completely missed the storm brewing in my own home. Later that afternoon, I drove with Tyler to the bank. Not our regular branch where Victoria and I were known, but the main office downtown. Asked to speak with a fraud specialist. Showed them the text message with the screenshot. Explained I'd been hospitalized, unconscious, when the withdrawals happened without my knowledge or consent. The woman behind the desk kept her face neutral, professional, but I could see it in her eyes. Pity, maybe a little anger on my behalf. "Mr. Reynolds, we can start a fraud investigation. But given that it's a joint account and your wife has equal access, it may be difficult to." "I understand." I cut in. "But I'd like to try anyway." She nodded, started typing on her computer. "We'll need records from the hospital confirming your stay, particularly documentation of when you were unconscious or incapacitated." "Not a problem. And you should know, if this becomes a criminal matter, the police will get involved." I looked at her steadily. "I'm aware." On the way back to Tyler's, we stopped for gas. I stayed in the car while he pumped. Through the windshield, I watched a mother with 2 kids buying ice cream from a convenience store. Normal life going on all around me. "Want anything?" Tyler asked. I shook my head. Back at his place, I made 3 phone calls. First, to my airline, telling them I needed extended medical leave. Second, to the credit union where I kept a small personal account for my side gig as a flight instructor. Third, to a lawyer friend of Tyler's. "I need to know where I stand," I explained. "With the house, with the accounts, with everything." The lawyer, Lucas, agreed to meet the next day. I hung up and pulled out my laptop. Logged into accounts Victoria didn't know existed. Checked the status of investments she'd never asked about. Not because I was hiding anything from her, but because she'd never shown interest in the boring parts of our finances. While I was doing that, another text came through from Victoria. "Where are you? Your car isn't at the airport parking. Did they tell you I came by?" I didn't answer. "Mason, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear. We need to talk about this." I put the phone down. Tyler looked over from the kitchen. "She reaching out?" "Yeah." "You going to respond?" I closed my laptop. "Not yet." That night, I took a walk around Tyler's neighborhood. It was a clear night, stars visible even with the city lights. For the first time since the hospital, my head didn't hurt. Not physically, anyway. I realized something during that walk. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just done. And with that came clarity. Victoria hadn't just taken my money. She'd given me my freedom. 2 weeks after I was discharged, I finally went home. Middle of the day, when I knew Victoria would be at her marketing job. Used my key, walked in like I'd just come back from another flight. The house smelled different. Cologne that wasn't mine. Empty wine bottles in the recycling bin. 2 wine glasses in the dishwasher. I packed some clothes, my important papers, and the small lockbox from the closet where I kept my birth certificate and passport. As I was walking out, I noticed the framed photo from our wedding day was missing from the hallway table. Back at Tyler's, I met with Lucas, the lawyer. We sat at the kitchen table with papers spread out between us. The house situation is interesting, he said, reviewing the refinancing documents. Since you refinanced solely in your name with that medical clause, and given your recent stroke, you have a strong case for sole possession. What about the money she took? Lucas frowned. That's trickier. Joint accounts typically mean joint ownership, but he tapped a finger on the bank statements. The fact that she cleared it out while you were medically incapacitated could constitute financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, especially since you have documentation that these were primarily your earnings. I nodded. And if I want a divorce? Minnesota is an equitable distribution state. Given the circumstances, I think we can make a compelling case for an arrangement in your favor. He gathered the papers. I'll draft some initial documents. In the meantime, don't contact her. Don't respond if she reaches out. Everything threw me now. The next day, Victoria showed up at Tyler's house. I was alone, Tyler at work. I heard her car pull up but didn't look out the window. The doorbell rang 3 times before she started knocking. I know you're in there, Mason. Your car is parked down the street. Her voice was muffled through the door. You can't just hide. We need to talk about this. I sat perfectly still in the living room, like a kid playing hide and seek. Eventually, the knocking stopped. I thought she'd left until my phone buzzed. I'm sorry about the money. I was angry. You've been distant for months. I thought you were cheating. I found out about the house refinancing and panicked. We can work this out. Please talk to me. It was the first time she'd ever accused me of cheating. Projection, probably. I turned the phone face down without replying. The next day, Lucas called with news. Victoria contacted me, he said. She's hired Penelope Wright as her attorney. Penelope Wright, one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in the state, known for going after everything. Houses, retirement accounts, future earnings. What does that mean for us? I asked. It means she's not playing around. Wright is already claiming that your abandonment after the hospitalization constitutes desertion. She's painting you as unstable, saying you disappeared without explanation and are refusing communication. I let out a long breath. So what now? Now we get ahead of this. I filed for an emergency hearing regarding the funds she withdrew. Judge Thornton is presiding. He takes a very dim view of taking advantage of medical situations. After hanging up, I stared at the wall for a long time. Then I made another call to my niece Ellie. I needed her help with something specific. The next morning, I met with Lucas and Ellie at a coffee shop downtown. Ellie, at 26, was already showing the sharp legal mind that would make her a formidable attorney once she passed the bar. She'd brought copies of the medical power of attorney documents we'd prepared last year. You were smart to do this, Lucas said, reviewing the papers. With your profession and frequent travel, it was prudent planning. Dave's accident scared me, I explained. Seeing his girlfriend locked out of medical decisions because they weren't married, I didn't want that happening if something went wrong during a flight. What I didn't mention was that I'd originally named Victoria as my medical proxy. But after a particularly heated argument last year, one where she'd threatened to let them pull the plug if I ever ended up in a coma, I'd quietly changed it to Tyler. Victoria never asked, so I never told her. The timing works in our favor, Ellie pointed out. This was changed months before your stroke, so she can't claim it was done maliciously during the separation. Lucas nodded. And the fact that you refinanced the house before the medical emergency is crucial. It shows no intent to defraud during marital difficulties, just standard financial management. As we talked strategy, my phone buzzed with a text from Nolan again. Victoria's been asking if I've heard from you. Seems worried. Also, that guy's been back several times. Drives a black Audi. I showed Lucas the text. Interesting, he said. Could be useful. But don't respond yet. Later that afternoon, I drove by our house, my house, just to see if Victoria was home. I parked down the street, not hiding but not announcing my presence either. Sure enough, there was a black Audi in the driveway alongside Victoria's white BMW. I took a photo with my phone, then drove away. No confrontation, no drama. Just documentation. That evening, Victoria called 4 times. I didn't answer. Then a text. Mason, this is childish. I know you're upset about the money, but disappearing isn't solving anything. I've had to hire an attorney because you won't communicate. This isn't like you. She was right about one thing, it wasn't like me. The old Mason would have called back immediately, desperate to fix things, to understand what he'd done wrong. The old Mason would have apologized for making her feel abandoned, even while lying in a hospital bed recovering from a stroke. But the old Mason was gone. The new one was learning to protect himself. The next morning, I received a formal letter from Penelope Wright, Victoria's attorney. It was full of legal jargon and thinly veiled threats about marital abandonment and financial responsibility. It demanded I return home immediately or face consequences in divorce proceedings. Lucas laughed when I forwarded it to him. Classic Wright intimidation tactic. Don't worry about it. 2 days later, I got another text, not from Victoria, but from an unknown number. This is Kent. I'm a friend of Victoria's. She's very concerned about you. She's worried you might be having mental health issues after your stroke. We all just want to make sure you're okay. I showed it to Lucas during our next meeting. Kent, he mused. Interesting that her friend is reaching out. Save that text. You think it's the guy with the Audi? Almost certainly. And he's trying to establish a narrative about your mental state. Classic gaslighting. I nodded, remembering the cologne in the house. Should I respond? No. Everything threw me. The following week, Lucas called with surprising news. We've discovered something interesting, he said. Victoria has a separate bank account you don't know about. Opened 3 years ago. Significant deposits every month, mostly cash. My stomach tightened. How significant? Around $3,000 per month. Sometimes more. I did the math in my head. That was over $100,000 over 3 years. Money I knew nothing about. How did you find this? Discovery process. We requested financial disclosures for the emergency hearing about the emptied accounts. She tried to hide it, but her attorney had to include it. I sat down, feeling suddenly dizzy. Where was the money coming from? That's what we're trying to figure out. Her salary at the marketing firm doesn't explain it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the past 3 years. The increasing distance. The decreasing intimacy. The way she'd become protective of her phone. The work trips that seemed to coincide with my longer flight assignments. The next day, I drove by the house again. This time, I noticed something I hadn't before. A security camera pointed at the driveway. New. Definitely not there when I'd left for Chicago. I called Lucas immediately. They've installed security cameras, I said. Is that legal? It's still my house. Technically, yes, it's legal. But it's interesting timing. Document it, but don't approach the property again. They're trying to build a case that you're stalking or harassing her. That evening, I received a text from Victoria's attorney. Mr. Reynolds, please be advised that your surveillance of the marital home constitutes harassment. Any further incidents will be reported to the authorities and used in our case against you. Lucas advised me to stay away from the house entirely. They're baiting you, he explained, trying to provoke a reaction they can use against you. Instead, we focused on building our case. I provided Lucas with detailed records of home improvements I'd paid for over the years. A new roof, kitchen renovation, bathroom remodel. All funded by my separate savings account that Victoria hadn't known about. I also gave him flight logs showing I was out of town during many of the cash deposits into Victoria's secret account. And I asked Ellie to help me recover text messages between Victoria and me from the past year, showing her increasing coldness and disinterest. 2 days before our emergency hearing, I received an unexpected visitor at Tyler's house. Our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patel, from across the street from my house with Victoria. I saw you driving by, she said, sitting carefully on Tyler's couch. I've been worried about you. Victoria told everyone you were having mental problems after a minor health scare and needed time away. I offered her tea, which she accepted with shaking hands. I didn't believe her, Mrs. Patel continued. Not after seeing that man coming and going for months. Always when you were flying. I tried to keep my face neutral. Man? Yes, the neighbor. Nolan, I think his name is. From 2 doors down. She sipped her tea. They weren't very discreet. I may be old, but I'm not blind. My heart stopped. Nolan. Our neighbor who had been texting me about some guy visiting Victoria. The same Nolan who had lived 2 doors down for the past 5 years. The same Nolan who had helped me install our sprinkler system last summer. Are you certain? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Mrs. Patel nodded. Quite certain. I have insomnia, you see, up at all hours. I've seen him arriving late at night, leaving early in the morning. For at least a year now. After she left, I called Lucas. Nolan, I said. The neighbor. He's been playing me, sending me texts about some guy visiting Victoria when he's the one having the affair with her. Lucas was quiet for a moment. That changes things. It suggests a coordinated deception. Do you have those texts from him? Every single one. Good. And this Mrs. Patel, would she be willing to provide a statement? I think so. She seemed pretty disgusted by the whole thing. Perfect. This is exactly what we needed before the hearing. That night, I received one final text from Victoria. Mason, please. This has gone too far. I made a mistake taking the money, but you're scaring me with this behavior. Come home so we can talk. I still love you. I stared at those last 3 words for a long time. 3 words that would have meant everything to me just a month ago. Now they just felt like another manipulation. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned off my phone and got my first good night's sleep since the stroke. The morning of the emergency hearing arrived with unexpected clarity. My headaches had finally subsided, and for the first time since the stroke, I felt fully present. Tyler drove me downtown to the courthouse, both of us dressed in suits that felt strangely formal after weeks of recovery clothes. You ready for this? He asked as we parked. I nodded. More than ready. Lucas met us at the entrance, briefcase in hand. Judge Thornton is known for being no-nonsense, he explained as we walked through security. He doesn't like games or theatrics. Just stick to the facts. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Nothing like the dramatic spaces shown on TV. Victoria was already there, sitting beside Penelope Wright, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with impeccable posture and a gaze that could cut glass. Victoria looked up when I entered, her expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. I didn't acknowledge her. Judge Thornton entered and we all rose. He was older than I expected, with silver hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. After the formalities, he looked directly at me. Mr. Reynolds, I understand you recently suffered a medical emergency? Yes, Your Honor. A stroke, 3 weeks ago. He nodded, then turned to Victoria's attorney. Ms. Wright, your client withdrew the entirety of joint funds while Mr. Reynolds was hospitalized. Would you care to explain the timing? Penelope Wright stood smoothly. Your Honor, my client was under extreme duress. She had just learned that Mr. Reynolds had refinanced their home without her knowledge, removing her from the deed. She feared he was planning to leave her and was securing assets. Her actions, while perhaps hasty, were self-protective. The judge turned back to me. Is this true, Mr. Reynolds? Did you refinance the home without your wife's knowledge? Lucas stood. Your Honor, if I may address this point, Mr. Reynolds did indeed refinance the home 2 months before his medical emergency, taking advantage of lower interest rates. Mrs. Reynolds was invited to the signing but declined to attend due to work commitments. We have documentation from the title company confirming this. He handed a folder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Furthermore, Lucas continued, the refinancing included a medical contingency clause, standard for someone in Mr. Reynolds' profession as a commercial airline pilot. There was no intent to defraud Mrs. Reynolds. Judge Thornton reviewed the documents, then looked at Victoria. Mrs. Reynolds, were you aware of the refinancing? Victoria hesitated, then spoke softly. I knew he was looking into it, Your Honor, but I wasn't aware he had gone through with it without my signature. Lucas immediately responded, Your Honor, we have text messages between the parties where Mrs. Reynolds explicitly acknowledges the refinancing and expresses her preference not to attend the signing due to a work conflict. Another folder was passed forward. The judge reviewed it, his expression unchanging. Ms. Wright, your client's recollection seems to contradict the evidence, he noted. Penelope Wright shifted strategies. Your Honor, the larger issue here is Mr. Reynolds' concerning behavior following his stroke. He disappeared from the hospital without informing my client, has refused all communication, and has been observed surveilling the marital home. We have serious concerns about his mental state. This was the moment I'd been dreading and preparing for. Lucas had warned me they would try to paint me as unstable. Lucas stood again. Your Honor, Mr. Reynolds did not disappear. He was discharged properly from the hospital and chose to recover at his brother's home after discovering his wife had emptied their accounts while he was unconscious. As for communication, we have documentation of Mrs. Reynolds' texts to my client, which contain no inquiries about his health or well-being, only demands regarding money and property. The judge turned to me directly. Mr. Reynolds, why did you choose not to return to the marital home after your hospitalization? I stood, feeling surprisingly calm. Your Honor, when I regained consciousness after my stroke, the first communication I received from my wife was a screenshot showing she had emptied our accounts. Not a question about my condition, not concern about my recovery, just a notification that our money was gone. I made the decision to recover somewhere I felt safe and supported. The judge nodded thoughtfully. And the allegations of surveillance? I drove by the house twice, Your Honor. Once to collect necessary clothing and personal items when I knew my wife would be at work, and once to observe who was staying at my home, as I had received concerning information. This was where things got interesting. Lucas signaled the bailiff, who handed the judge yet another folder. Your Honor, Lucas said, we have evidence that Mrs. Reynolds has been engaged in an extramarital relationship with a neighbor, Mr. Nolan Parker, for approximately 1 year. Mr. Parker has been sending misleading texts to my client, pretending to be a concerned neighbor reporting some unknown man visiting Mrs. Reynolds, when in fact, he was that man. The courtroom went completely silent. Victoria's face drained of color. Additionally, Lucas continued, we have a sworn statement from another neighbor, Mrs. Patel, confirming Mr. Parker's regular overnight visits to the marital home during my client's work-related absences. Penelope Wright was on her feet immediately. Your Honor, these allegations are irrelevant to the financial matter at hand and are clearly intended to embarrass my client. Judge Thornton raised an eyebrow. On the contrary, Ms. Wright, if your client has been maintaining a relationship with another individual while draining marital assets, that is highly relevant to these proceedings. He turned to Victoria. Mrs. Reynolds, are you currently in a relationship with Mr. Parker? Victoria looked at her attorney, who gave a slight nod. Yes, Your Honor, Victoria admitted quietly. But it only began after Mason became distant. He was always gone, always flying. I was lonely. I kept my expression neutral, though inside I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. Lucas pressed forward. Your Honor, we have also discovered, through financial disclosures, that Mrs. Reynolds has maintained a separate bank account for the past 3 years, with regular cash deposits totaling approximately $108,000. These deposits often coincided with Mr. Reynolds' flight schedule. The judge frowned. Mrs. Reynolds, what is the source of these funds? Victoria shifted uncomfortably. It's income from freelance marketing work, Your Honor. Lucas was ready. Your Honor, we've subpoenaed Mrs. Reynolds' tax returns, which show no reported freelance income. Additionally, we have evidence that Mr. Parker has been making regular cash withdrawals from his account in similar amounts shortly before these deposits. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Thornton banged his gavel once. Order, he said firmly, then looked directly at Victoria. Mrs. Reynolds, are you claiming under oath that these deposits are legitimate business income? Victoria looked trapped. Penelope Wright leaned over and whispered something to her. Your Honor, Victoria said finally. I would like to exercise my Fifth Amendment right at this time. The judge's expression hardened. That is certainly your right, Mrs. Reynolds. He turned to me. Mr. Reynolds, when did you become aware of this account? Only during discovery for this hearing, Your Honor. I had no knowledge of it during our marriage. Judge Thornton reviewed the papers before him for several long moments. The courtroom remained silent. Finally, he looked up. Based on the evidence presented, I am ordering the immediate return of all funds withdrawn from the joint accounts during Mr. Reynolds' medical incapacitation. Furthermore, I am freezing the separate account maintained by Mrs. Reynolds pending further investigation. He turned to Victoria. Mrs. Reynolds, your actions show a disturbing pattern of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, your husband, while he was medically incapacitated. I am referring this matter to the county attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Victoria gasped audibly. Penelope Wright immediately began whispering to her. Additionally, the judge continued, Mr. Reynolds' sole ownership of the marital home is upheld based on the legitimate refinancing that occurred prior to these events. Mrs. Reynolds, you have 30 days to vacate the property. He banged his gavel. We're adjourned. Full divorce proceedings will be scheduled separately. As we stood to leave, I finally made eye contact with Victoria. Her carefully constructed facade had crumbled, replaced by something I'd never seen before, fear. Not of me, but of consequences. For perhaps the first time in our marriage, she was facing the reality of her actions. I felt no joy in her distress, just a profound sense of closure. As Tyler and I walked out of the courtroom, he put his hand on my shoulder. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Better than I've been in years.